Zefkar had seen many species across the galaxy during his 15 cycles of service with the Galactic Defense Corps. The tall, blue-skinned Alterian had fought beside the mighty Krogan warriors, whose stone-like hides could deflect plasma rounds. He had witnessed the tactical brilliance of the insectoid Hivari, who moved as one mind across battlefields. He had even served alongside the ethereal Luminari, beings of pure energy who could phase through solid matter. But humans? They were new to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 3 cycles ago. Most species regarded them as curiosities at best, primitives at worst. They came from a death world called Earth, where gravity was crushing and the atmosphere was poison to most civilized beings. Their bodies were soft, their technology crude, and their lifespans laughably short. Zefkar adjusted his environmental suit as the transport ship Stellar Dawn dropped out of hyperspace near the contested moon of Karas 7. Through the viewport, he could see the barren, rocky surface where the Vorthak Collective had established their forward base. The insectoid Vorthak were expanding aggressively into this sector, enslaving weaker species and strip-mining entire worlds for resources. All units, prepare for deployment, came the voice of Commander Veldatz over the comm system. The Thrakari commander's forearms gestured efficiently as she reviewed tactical displays. Intelligence suggests the Vorthak have approximately 2,000 ground troops fortified in the mining complex. Our mission is to neutralize the base and prevent them from using Karas 7 as a staging point for further expansion. Zefkar checked his pulse rifle and surveyed the mixed force of alien soldiers around him. There were 50 Krogan shock troopers, their massive frames barely fitting in the transport seats. 20 Hivari scouts buzzed quietly among themselves, their compound eyes already analyzing potential battlefield scenarios. A dozen Luminari floated near the ceiling, their forms crackling with barely contained energy. And then, there were the humans. 12 of them sat in a corner of the transport, looking impossibly small and fragile compared to the other species. They wore basic combat armor that seemed almost primitive next to the advanced suits of the other troops. Their weapons were simple projectile firearms that fired metal slugs instead of sophisticated energy weapons. Most disturbing of all, they were completely exposed to the ship's atmosphere, breathing the same recycled air without any protective filtration systems. The human squad leader, a female designated as Sergeant Chen, was reviewing something on a small handheld device. Her brown eyes were calm, almost bored, as she studied what Zefkar assumed was tactical information. The other humans showed similar composure, some cleaning their weapons, others simply sitting in quiet meditation. It was unnerving. "First time fighting alongside humans?" asked Korvek, a Krogan warrior whose scarred hide told stories of countless battles. The massive humanoid gestured toward the human squad with one of his 4 arms. "Yes," Zefkar replied, his translator unit converting his native clicks and whistles into galactic standard. "I have read the reports about their homeworld, but seeing them in person is strange." Korvek's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his people. "Strange is one word for it. I fought beside them in the Helios campaign 3 months ago. They are not what they appear to be." Before Zefkar could ask what the Krogan meant, the transport shuddered as it entered Karas 7's thin atmosphere. The pilot, a nervous centauri with elongated limbs, announced their approach to the drop zone. Commander Veldatz stood, her imposing figure commanding immediate attention. "Deployment in 60 seconds. Remember, the Vorthak have had 3 weeks to fortify their position. Expect heavy resistance and layered defensive systems. Krogan units will spearhead the assault, with Hivari providing reconnaissance and Luminari offering fire support. The Alterian squad will secure the perimeter and prevent enemy reinforcement." She paused, her large eyes briefly focusing on the human squad. "The humans will assist as able." There was something in her tone that suggested she didn't expect much from Earth's representatives. Zefkar noticed that Sergeant Chen's expression didn't change at all, though several of her squad members exchanged glances. The transport touched down heavily on Karas 7's surface, and the deployment ramps lowered with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Zefkar felt his stomach drop as he realized they were landing in broad daylight, completely exposed to enemy observation. The mining complex loomed in the distance, a sprawling collection of metal structures and defensive towers that bristled with weapons. "Move out!" Commander Veldatz roared, and the mixed force of alien soldiers poured from the transport. The Vorthak response was immediate and devastating. Energy beams lanced out from hidden positions, turning the landing zone into a killing field. A Krogan warrior to Zefkar's left simply vanished in a flash of superheated plasma. Hivari scouts tried to scatter, but several were caught in overlapping fields of fire and fell twitching to the rocky ground. Zefkar dove behind a boulder, his pulse rifle already charging for return fire. Around him, the carefully planned assault was dissolving into chaos. The Vorthak had clearly been expecting them, and their defensive positions were expertly concealed and coordinated. "We need to fall back," someone shouted over the calm. "This is a killing field." "Negative." Commander Veldatz responded, though Zefkar could hear strain in her voice. "We push forward. Krogan units, advance and provide cover." But the Krogan were pinned down, their massive forms making easy targets for Vorthak gunners. The Luminari tried to provide covering fire, but their energy blasts were being absorbed by some kind of defensive shielding around the enemy positions. That's when Zefkar first noticed something odd about the humans. While every other species was taking cover and returning sporadic fire, the human squad was moving. Not retreating, not advancing recklessly, but moving with a purpose that seemed almost casual. Sergeant Chen had her weapon raised and was speaking quietly into her comm unit, apparently giving orders to her squad. "Chen, what's your status?" Commander Veldatz asked over the general frequency. "We're advancing, Commander," came the calm reply. "Give us 30 seconds. Advancing? You need to take cover. Those defensive positions are too well fortified for a frontal assault." "Understood, ma'am." 30 seconds. Zefkar watched in fascination and growing horror as the humans began to move across the battlefield. They didn't charge like Krogan warriors or phase through cover like Luminari. Instead, they moved in a way that seemed almost like dancing, flowing from one piece of cover to the next with an efficiency that was beautiful to watch. One human would lay down covering fire while another moved. The moment the second human reached cover, the first would move while the second provided support. They leapfrogged across the battlefield in a pattern so smooth it looked rehearsed, but Zefkar could tell it was pure improvisation. And their weapons. Those primitive projectile firearms were making sounds unlike anything he had heard before. Instead of the clean energy discharge of proper weapons, they produced sharp cracks that seemed to echo off the rocks in disturbing ways. "How are they doing that?" Korvac asked, his massive frame pressed against the same boulder that sheltered Zefkar. "The Vorthak should have cut them down by now." Zefkar watched through his rifle scope as a human soldier named Rodriguez, according to his armor markings, ducked behind a piece of debris. As he moved, a Vorthak energy beam missed him by mere inches, close enough that it should have been impossible to avoid. But the human had moved before the beam was fired. "They're predicting the shots," Zefkar breathed, not quite believing what he was seeing. "They're moving before the Vorthak pull their triggers." The realization sent a chill down his spine. How could any being predict enemy fire patterns with such precision? The Vorthak were experienced warriors with advanced targeting systems. Yet these primitive humans were dancing between their shots like they could see the future. Another human, Jackson, reached a position about 200 meters from the main defensive line. He raised his weapon and fired a single shot. The sound was different from the others, deeper and more resonant. A moment later, one of the Vorthak defensive towers simply stopped firing. "Sniper," Sergeant Chen reported calmly. "Tower 3 is down. Moving to secondary targets." Zefkar zoomed his scope toward the tower and felt his blood freeze. There was a hole in the armored wall, perfectly round and about the size of his thumb. But that was impossible. The tower's armor was rated to withstand heavy plasma bombardment. How could a simple projectile weapon punch through it? "The ammunition," he whispered, understanding beginning to dawn. "What are they firing?" As if summoned by his question, another human soldier appeared near his position. It was Private Martinez, a young human female who looked barely old enough to be a warrior. She was reloading her weapon, and Zefkar could see the ammunition she was using. The projectiles were small, metallic, and completely unremarkable looking. But, as Martinez worked, Zefkar noticed something that made his mind reel. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, performing the reload sequence with muscle memory so ingrained it looked automatic. But what disturbed him was the complete lack of emotion on her face. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't excited. She wasn't angry or determined or any of the emotions Zefkar had seen on warriors in combat. She was simply working. "How many rounds do you carry?" Zefkar asked her during a brief lull in the firing. Martinez looked at him with brown eyes that seemed much older than her apparent age. 360 rounds of standard ammunition, plus 40 rounds of armor-piercing, plus 12 grenades, plus 1 combat knife, plus emergency medical supplies, plus 3 days of rations, plus water purification tablets, plus a field communication unit, plus backup power cells, plus. She rattled off the list with the same casual tone someone might use to describe their lunch. How much does all of that weigh? Zefkar asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. About 45 kilograms, not counting the armor, Martinez replied, then turned back to the battle as if discussing the massive load she carried was the most normal thing in the galaxy. 45 kilograms. On a world with gravity higher than most species could tolerate. And she was moving across the battlefield like she was carrying nothing at all. Contact front, came Sergeant Chen's voice over the comb. Vortak infantry moving to flank our position. Approximately 50 hostiles. Zefkar turned his attention to where the humans were positioned and felt his world shift. The Vortak soldiers were indeed advancing, their insectoid forms skittering across the rocky terrain with frightening speed. They were well-armored, well-armed, and moved with the coordination of a species that had been fighting wars for thousands of years. The humans saw them coming. What happened next would haunt Zefkar's dreams for the rest of his life. The 12 human soldiers transitioned from their previous tactical movement into something else entirely. Something that wasn't tactical or strategic or any of the military concepts Zefkar understood. It was predatory. They spread out into a formation that seemed random but somehow allowed each of them perfect fields of fire. Their weapons spoke in a rapid rhythm that sounded almost musical, if music could be made from death and precision. The Vortak charge faltered, then broke, then became a rout as the insectoid warriors found themselves caught in crossfire from positions they couldn't even see. The humans weren't just shooting at the Vortak, they were hurting them, driving them into kill zones with the casual efficiency of farmers harvesting crops. My God, whispered one of the Luminari, his energy form flickering with what Zefkar recognized as distress. What are they? Private Martinez was reloading again, her movements still perfectly mechanical. A Vortak soldier had managed to get close enough to engage her in close combat, its razor-sharp claws extended for a killing strike. Martinez didn't use her weapon. Instead, she pulled out a simple knife, a piece of sharpened metal that looked almost primitive compared to the advanced combat implements carried by other species. The Vortak warrior was larger, stronger, and armed with natural weapons that could slice through most armor. The fight lasted 3 seconds. When it was over, the Vortak lay dead, and Martinez was cleaning her knife on a piece of cloth before returning it to its sheath. She picked up her rifle and continued advancing as if nothing had happened. How? Korvac asked, his voice filled with an emotion Zefkar had never heard from a Krogan before. Fear. How did she do that? Zefkar didn't have an answer. The Vortak were experienced warriors, evolved predators with reflexes honed by millions of years of evolution. Yet this young human female had killed one with a simple blade in close combat. All units, advance, came Sergeant Chen's voice. Primary defensive line is compromised. Moving to secure the facility. Commander Valdats's voice came over the comm, filled with confusion and something that might have been concern. Chen, report your casualties. No casualties, Commander. All 12 humans operational and advancing. No casualties. In a battle that had already claimed the lives of 8 Krogan warriors, 6 HFY scouts, and 2 Luminari, the humans had taken no losses at all. They had walked through a prepared defensive position like it was a training exercise. As the mixed force advanced toward the mining facility, Zefkar found himself watching the humans with growing unease. They moved through the battlefield with the same casual efficiency they had shown throughout the engagement, but now he was beginning to understand what he was seeing. These weren't soldiers in the way other species understood the term. Krogan warriors fought with fury and strength. HFY scouts used speed and coordination. Luminari brought overwhelming firepower to bear. Humans fought like death itself had learned to walk upright and carry weapons. The mining facility loomed ahead, its defensive systems now largely silent thanks to the human advance. But Zefkar could see more Vortak positions deeper in the complex, and he suspected the real fighting was just beginning. As they approached the main entrance, Sergeant Chen raised her hand, and the entire human squad stopped instantly. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Commander, she said quietly, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Velvats asked. The kind where someone's about to find out why humans are scary. And, in that moment, as Zefkar looked at the 12 human soldiers standing calmly in the shadow of the enemy facility, he realized that everything he thought he knew about warfare was about to change. The entrance to the Vorthak mining facility was a masterpiece of defensive engineering. Zefkar could see multiple layers of automated gun turrets, energy barriers, and what appeared to be pressure-sensitive explosive charges embedded in the ground. Any conventional assault would result in massive casualties, even for a force 10 times their size. Commander Velvats was studying her tactical display with growing concern. The defensive systems are more sophisticated than our intelligence suggested. We'll need to call for orbital bombardment to clear a path. How long would that take? Sergeant Chen asked, her voice still carrying that unsettling calmness. Minimum 4 hours for the fleet to get into position, Velvats replied. Probably 6 before they can begin bombardment. We don't have 6 hours, Chen said simply. Vorthak reinforcements will arrive in 3. She was right. Zefkar had seen the tactical reports. The Vorthak had 2 battle cruisers in adjacent systems that could reach Kara 7 within hours if they received a distress call. The window for this operation was rapidly closing. Then, we abort, Commander Velvats decided. We fall back and wait for proper support. Commander, Chen interrupted, request permission to attempt entry. The silence that followed was deafening. Every non-human soldier stared at the 12 humans with expressions ranging from disbelief to horror. The idea of attempting to breach those defenses with such a small force was beyond reckless, it was suicidal. Sergeant Chen, Velvats said carefully, those defensive systems could stop a Krogan assault battalion. Your squad cannot possibly, with respect, ma'am, Chen cut her off, you don't know what we can do. There was something in her tone that made Zefkar's skin crawl. It wasn't boastful or arrogant. It was the voice of someone stating a simple fact, like mentioning that water was wet or that space was cold. Explain, Velvats ordered. Chen gestured to her squad, and they began unpacking equipment that Zefkar didn't recognize. Private Williams is our demolitions expert. He can disable the automated turrets without triggering their backup systems. Corporal Thompson specializes in electronic warfare, she can take down the energy barriers. The rest of us will handle any Vorthak resistance inside. That's impossible, protested Hivari Scout leader Skixtal, his compound eyes reflecting the afternoon light. The turret systems have biological scanners. They'll detect any approach. Private Williams looked up from the device he was assembling. He was a large human, even by their standards, with hands that seemed too big for the delicate work he was performing. Ma'am, should I explain the technical aspects, or just show them? Show them, Chen replied. What happened next challenged everything Zefkar thought he knew about military technology and tactics. Williams produced what looked like a simple sphere, about the size of his fist, made from some kind of matte black material. He activated something on its surface, and the sphere began to disappear. Not invisibility, exactly, but somehow it became difficult to focus on, as if Zefkar's eyes kept sliding off it. Adaptive camouflage, Williams explained conversationally as he attached the device to what appeared to be a small flying drone. Mimics local background radiation and visual signatures. To the turret sensors, this will read as empty space. The drone lifted off silently and flew toward the defensive line. Zefkar watched through his rifle scope as it approached the first automated turret, a massive weapon system that could track and destroy incoming missiles traveling at hypersonic speeds. The turret didn't react at all. Williams was controlling the drone through a handheld device, guiding it with steady hands to a specific point on the turret's housing. The drone extended a small appendage and touched something on the weapon system. Charges placed, Williams reported. Moving to target 2. What kind of charges? Asked Korbeck, his Krogan voice filled with professional interest. Shaped thermal lances, Williams replied without looking up from his controller. They'll cut through the turret's armor and disable the main capacitor banks without causing secondary explosions that might alert the facility's central command. Zefkar blinked. Shaped thermal lances were theoretical weapons that most species military engineers were still trying to develop. The energy requirements alone should have made them impossible to miniaturize. Where did you learn to make those? Velvats asked. Williams shrugged, a very human gesture that somehow conveyed both modesty and something darker. Basic demolitions training. Every human soldier learns this stuff. Every human soldier. Zefkar felt a chill that had nothing to do with Kara 7's thin atmosphere. If this was basic training for humans, what did their advanced specialists know? The drone continued its work, systematically disabling turret after turret with impossible precision. Meanwhile, Corporal Thompson had produced another device that she was pointing at the energy barriers protecting the facility entrance. Getting some interesting readings, she reported to Chen. The barriers are using a quantum interference pattern I haven't seen before. Give me 30 seconds. Her device made soft beeping sounds as she worked, her fingers dancing over controls too small for Zefkar to see clearly. Thompson was young, probably no more than 20 standard years, yet she was analyzing alien technology that had taken the Vortak centuries to develop. Got it, she announced. The barriers are tied into the facility's main power grid through a resonance frequency. If I can generate the right harmonic, I can create a feedback loop that'll bring down the whole system for about 90 seconds. Do it, Chen ordered. Thompson's device emitted a sound that made Zefkar's bones ache. The energy barriers flickered once, then collapsed entirely. All barriers down, Thompson reported. You have 90 seconds before their backup generators kick in. More than enough, Chen said. Squad, move. The 12 human soldiers flowed toward the facility entrance with that same disturbing grace Zefkar had observed during the previous battle. They moved as if they had practiced this exact approach hundreds of times, though he knew that was impossible. Wait, Commander Vel, that's called. We should provide covering fire, establish overwatch positions. No need, Chen replied over her shoulder. We'll be done before you could get into position. And then, they were inside the facility, disappearing into the metal corridors beyond the entrance. The remaining alien forces were left standing in the open, staring at the now silent defensive systems that had been neutralized in under 5 minutes. What just happened? Asked one of the Luminari, his energy form flickering with confusion. Before anyone could answer, sounds began echoing from inside the facility. Not the clean energy discharges of advanced weapons, but the sharp cracks of human firearms. The sounds were rhythmic, almost musical, punctuated occasionally by what Zefkar was beginning to recognize as the particular tone human weapons made when firing their armor-piercing ammunition. Chen, report, Veldat's called into her comm encountering light resistance, came the calm reply. Approximately 40 Vortak defenders in the main corridor. They've established defensive positions behind portable barriers. Do you need support? Negative. Give us 3 minutes. 3 minutes to clear 40 entrenched Vortak soldiers? It was madness. The insectoid warriors were experienced, well-armed, and fighting on their own territory. Even a full Krogan assault team would need at least 20 minutes to clear such a position. The firing from inside the facility intensified for perhaps 30 seconds, then gradually tapered off. When it stopped entirely, the silence was somehow worse than the battle sounds had been. Chen. Vel, that's called. Corridor secured. Moving to secondary objectives. We've located what appears to be a control room on the 3rd level. Also detecting large concentrations of Vortak personnel in the lower mining levels. How many? Approximately 300 hostiles. They appear to be civilian miners, not soldiers, but they're armed and prepared to fight. 300. Against 12 humans. Zefkar found himself holding his breath. Fall back and wait for reinforcement, Veldat's ordered. You cannot engage that many hostiles. Commander, Chen's voice carried a note that might have been amusement. You keep underestimating us. I am not sending 12 soldiers against 300 enemies. Ma'am, with respect, you're not sending us anywhere. We're already here, and we have a job to do. The comm channel went silent for a moment before Chen's voice returned. Jackson has eyes on the control room. Appears to be lightly defended, maybe 6 hostiles. Rodriguez is identifying alternate routes to the mining levels. Thompson is working on accessing their computer systems. How is she accessing their computers? Vel, that's demanded. Vortak systems use completely different interface protocols. Ma'am, Thompson speaks 17 languages and reads 23 different computer architectures. Vortak programming is based on hexadecimal mathematics with some interesting twists, but it's not fundamentally different from a dozen other systems we've encountered. 17 languages. 23 computer architectures. Zefkar stared at the facility entrance, trying to process what he was hearing. This wasn't possible. No individual, regardless of species, could master such diverse technical knowledge. Unless. How long do humans live? He asked Korvac quietly. The Krogan warrior considered the question. Standard Earth years? Maybe 80, 90 at most. Very short-lived species. 80 years. And, in that brief span, they somehow accumulated knowledge and skills that most species took centuries to develop. How? The sounds of combat resumed from deeper in the facility, but now they were different. Instead of the sustained firefights Zefkar expected, he heard brief, sharp exchanges followed by silence. As if the humans were encountering pockets of resistance and eliminating them with surgical precision. Control room secured, came Jackson's voice. I have access to facility schematics and personnel locations. Transmitting data to squad. How many Vorthak are we actually dealing with? Chen asked. Total count, 843 individuals. About 60% are non-combatants, but they're all armed with mining equipment that could be dangerous in close quarters. The remaining 40% are actual soldiers. 800 Vorthak. 40% soldiers meant over 300 trained warriors. Against 12 humans. That's too many, Veldats protested. Even if they were all civilians, the numbers are impossible. Respectfully disagree, Chen replied. Martinez, Williams, take the East Mining Corridor. Thompson, Lee, you have the West Corridor. Jackson, Rodriguez, secure the central shaft. Henderson, Kim, Parker, you're with me. We take the command center and work our way down. Chen, this is insane. Veldet shouted into her calm fallback immediately. That's an order. Ma'am, Chen's voice was patient, almost gentle. In human military doctrine, soldiers are expected to complete their assigned missions regardless of personal risk. Our mission is to secure this facility. We will complete that mission. The comm channel closed. For the next hour, Zefkar and the other alien soldiers waited outside the facility, listening to a symphony of destruction from within. The sounds weren't random or chaotic, they followed patterns that spoke of careful planning and flawless execution. Occasionally, one of the humans would report over the comm system. East Corridor secured. Moving to Level 2. Or Central Shaft cleared. Proceeding to mining equipment storage. The reports were delivered in the same calm, professional tones they had used throughout the operation. What disturbed Zefkar most was what they weren't saying. No calls for medical assistance. No requests for additional ammunition. No reports of casualties or equipment failures. Just steady progress through a facility containing over 800 hostile aliens. I'm picking up Vorthak emergency transmissions, reported the Centauri pilot from the transport. They're requesting immediate evacuation and describing. I'm not sure how to translate this. Demons attacking their facility. Demons. Zefkar looked at the silent facility entrance and wondered if the Vorthak description was more accurate than anyone wanted to admit. Final level secured, came Chen's voice after what seemed like an eternity. Facility is under our control. We have 47 Vorthak prisoners, mostly non-combatants who surrendered when they realized resistance was futile. The rest chose to fight. Casualties? Veldats asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. No human casualties. All personnel operational and ready for extraction. Impossible. It was simply impossible. No force of 12 soldiers, regardless of training or equipment, could clear a fortified facility containing over 800 hostiles without taking losses. But, as the human squad emerged from the facility 20 minutes later, Zefkar could see the proof with his own eyes. All 12 soldiers were walking under their own power, their weapons clean, their armor showing minimal damage. They looked like they had just finished a routine training exercise. Mission accomplished, Sergeant Chen reported to Commander Veldats. Facility secured, resistance neutralized, prisoners ready for transport. Veldats stared at the human squad with an expression Zefkar had never seen on a Thrakkery face before, pure, undiluted fear. How, she whispered. Chen's brown eyes met the alien commander's gaze. For a moment, Zefkar thought he saw something flicker in their depths, something ancient and terrible that had no business existing in the mind of such a young being. We did what we were trained to do, Chen replied simply. What any human soldier would do. As they boarded the transport for the journey back to the fleet, Zefkar found himself sitting near Private Martinez again. The young human woman was field stripping her weapon with the same mechanical precision she had shown throughout the operation. "Can I ask you something?" Zefkar said quietly. Martinez looked at him with those disturbingly old eyes. "Sure. How old were you when you learned to fight like that?" She considered the question as she cleaned her rifle's firing mechanism. "Which part? Basic marksmanship, close combat, tactical movement, or battlefield awareness?" "Any of it. Started learning to shoot when I was 6. Hand-to-hand combat at 8. Advanced tactics at 12. Been doing this stuff most of my life." Most of her life. Zefkar calculated rapidly. Martinez appeared to be in her early 20s, which meant she had been learning to kill for over 15 years. More than 3/4 of her entire existence. "Is that normal for humans?" he asked. Martinez shrugged, that same gesture Williams had used. "Depends on where you grow up. Some places are rougher than others." "And everyone in your squad has similar training?" "More or less. Shen was military brat, grew up on a dozen different worlds. Williams learned demolitions working in asteroid mining. Thompson was a computer prodigy who got recruited by intelligence services when she was 14. 14. Zefkar felt sick. "What about you?" Martinez asked. "How old were you when you started military training?" 25, Zefkar replied. "Most Altarians don't begin warrior training until they reach full maturity." Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. You have longer lifespans, so you can afford to spend more time on childhood and education before specializing." "How long do you expect to live?" Zefkar asked, though he dreaded the answer. "In this job?" "Maybe another 5 or 10 years if I'm lucky and careful." She said it with the same casual tone she might use to discuss the weather. "But that's okay. Long enough to do some good, maybe help keep some people safe." The transport lifted off from Kara's 7's surface, carrying its mixed crew of alien soldiers and human demons. As they rose through the thin atmosphere, Zefkar stared down at the conquered mining facility and tried to understand what he had witnessed. 12 humans had accomplished what should have required a full battalion of troops. They had done it without taking casualties, without requesting support, and with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. But the most terrifying part wasn't their capability. It was their acceptance of what they were. They didn't see themselves as monsters or killing machines. To them, this was simply their job, their contribution to the galaxy's safety. As the transport entered hyperspace for the journey home, Zefkar closed his eyes and tried not to think about what humanity might be capable of if they ever decided the galaxy needed more than protection. The journey back to the fleet took 18 hours, and Zefkar spent most of that time observing the human squad. What he saw disturbed him more than the battle had. They weren't celebrating their victory or even discussing it. Instead, they had immediately transitioned into what appeared to be routine maintenance activities. Weapons were disassembled, cleaned, and reassembled with methodical precision. Equipment was inventoried and repaired. Personal gear was organized and secured. But it was their conversations that truly unsettled him. "Martinez, you're low on armor-piercing rounds," observed Corporal Thompson, making notes on a handheld device. 47 left, Martinez confirmed without looking up from the scope she was adjusting. "Should be enough for the next engagement." "Next engagement?" Korvac asked from across the transport bay. "We just completed our mission." Thompson glanced at him with mild confusion. "Yes, sir. But there are Vorthack installations in 6 other systems. Command will probably send us to at least 3 of them before we rotate back to Earth." "You expect to fight 3 more battles like that?" "Probably more challenging," Private Williams added, packing away his demolitions equipment. "The Vorthack will adapt their tactics now that they know humans are involved. They'll upgrade their defensive systems and modify their personnel deployment strategies." Williams spoke with the calm professionalism of someone analyzing a technical problem, not discussing life and death combat situations. It was as if he were planning routine maintenance procedures rather than battles against overwhelming odds. "How can you be so casual about this?" asked Skix Tal, the Hivari scout leader. "You just fought 800 enemies." 843, Jackson corrected from his position near the viewport. And it wasn't that challenging, really. Most of them were miners with basic weapons. Only about 300 were actual soldiers, and they fought conventionally. Conventionally? Commander Veldatz asked, moving closer to the human group. Standard defensive positions, predictable flanking maneuvers, textbook ambush tactics, Jackson explained. Nothing we haven't seen before. The Vorthak are good soldiers, but they fight like soldiers. They follow doctrine. And humans don't follow doctrine? Veldatz pressed. Jackson exchanged a glance with Sergeant Chen, who had been silently reviewing after-action reports on her personal device. Chen looked up and seemed to consider how to respond. Human military doctrine is different, she said finally. Most species develop tactics based on their natural advantages. Krogan use strength and durability. Hivari rely on coordination and numbers. Luminari leverage energy manipulation. What do humans use? Zefkar found himself asking. Adaptation, Chen replied. We don't have natural advantages, so we learn to become whatever the situation requires. Sometimes that means being soldiers. Sometimes it means being hunters. Sometimes. She trailed off, and Zefkar noticed that the other human soldiers had stopped their maintenance activities to listen. There was something in their expressions, a shared understanding that excluded every other species in the transport. Sometimes what? Veldatz demanded. Sometimes it means being something else entirely, Chen finished quietly. The silence that followed was broken by the arrival of Private Lee, who had been forward in the transport's communication section. The young Asian woman approached Chen with a tablet displaying what appeared to be fleet communications. Sergeant, we've got new orders, Lee reported. Command wants to debrief us about the operation, but there's been a development. What kind of development? Chen asked, taking the tablet. 3 more Vorthak facilities have gone dark in the last 6 hours. No communication, no response to hails. Fleet intelligence thinks they're either evacuating or preparing for something bigger. Chen studied the information for several seconds before passing the tablet to Jackson. Analysis? Jackson scanned the data quickly, his eyes moving with the same mechanical precision Zefkar had observed in all the human soldiers. Pattern suggests coordinated response to our success at Kara 7. They're either consolidating forces for a major counterattack or abandoning this sector entirely. Which is more likely? Veldatz asked. Counterattack, Thompson answered without hesitation. The Vorthak don't abandon territory without fighting for it. They're probably massing forces for a siege operation against our fleet. Zefkar felt a chill. A Vorthak siege fleet would consist of dozens of heavily armed vessels supported by thousands of fighters. Even the full Galactic Defense Corps fleet would struggle against such an armada. How can you be certain? Asked one of the Luminari, his energy form flickering nervously. Because that's what we would do, Chen replied. When facing an enemy with superior tactical capabilities, you mass overwhelming force and engage them on terms that negate their advantages. The Vorthak aren't stupid. So what do we do? Veldatz asked. Chen was quiet for a moment, apparently thinking. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note that Zefkar was beginning to recognize as dangerous. We make sure they don't get the chance. The transport's intercom crackled to life with the voice of Admiral Korthax, the Draconian commander of the fleet. All personnel, prepare for emergence from hyperspace in 30 minutes. Long-range sensors indicate significant Vorthak activity in the target system. All combat units are to report to battle stations immediately upon arrival. The human squad began moving with increased urgency, but their actions remained controlled and purposeful. Weapons that had just been cleaned were checked again. Armor systems were tested. Equipment loadouts were verified. Chen, Admiral Korthax's voice came directly over the squad's communication frequency. Report to the bridge immediately upon docking. Bring your tactical analysis of Vorthak capabilities. Acknowledged, Admiral, Chen replied. As the transport began its final approach to the fleet, Zefkar found himself staring out the viewport at the assembled ships. The Galactic Defense Corps had committed significant resources to this operation, 12 cruisers, 40 destroyers, and nearly 200 fighter craft. It was an impressive force by any measure. But, somehow, looking at the 12 human soldiers calmly preparing for what was obviously going to be another battle, Zefkar suspected the real strength of the fleet wasn't measured in ships and weapons. "Private Martinez," he said quietly, "can I ask you something personal?" She looked up from the medical kit she was organizing. "Sure. Are you afraid?" Martinez considered the question seriously. "Of what?" "Of dying. Of the battle ahead. Of any of this." She was quiet for a long moment, and Zefkar thought she might not answer. Then, she spoke, and her words chilled him more than anything he had heard during the entire operation. "Fear is useful for species that have choices," she said. "When you only have one choice, fear just gets in the way." "What do you mean?" Martinez gestured toward the viewport, where the enemy system was growing larger. "There are Vorthak out there who want to hurt people. We're the ones equipped to stop them. There's no choice to make, so there's nothing to be afraid of." The simplicity of her logic was terrifying. To Martinez, and apparently to all the human soldiers, the situation was binary. There were enemies who needed to be stopped, and they were the instruments of that stopping. No moral complexity, no strategic considerations, no fear or hesitation. They were weapons that had chosen their targets. The transport docked with the fleet flagship, a massive Thrakkery battlecruiser called Righteous Thunder. As the mixed force of alien soldiers disembarked, they were met by fleet intelligence officers who immediately began conducting preliminary debriefings. Zefkar watched as the human squad was separated from the other troops and escorted toward the ship's command sections. They walked with the same calm confidence they had displayed throughout the operation, but now there was something else in their bearing. Anticipation. "Korvac," Zefkar said to the Krogan warrior, "I need to ask you something about your previous experience with humans." The massive alien paused in checking his battle gear. "What do you want to know?" "During the Helios campaign, what did they do?" Korvac's mandibles clicked nervously. The Helios system was occupied by Syndicate pirates. 3 planets, approximately 50,000 hostiles spread across multiple installations. Fleet Command estimated it would take 6 months to clear them out. How long did it actually take? 18 days. 18 days to clear 50,000 enemies from 3 planets. Zefkar felt his respiratory system struggling to process the information. "How many human soldiers were involved?" he asked. 48. 48 humans against 50,000 pirates. The mathematics were insane, impossible, defying everything Zefkar understood about warfare and tactics. "What did they do?" he whispered. Korvac's 4 eyes focused on something distant, and, when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of memory. "They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like a natural disaster given purpose and direction. The pirates started surrendering after the first week, but the humans didn't stop." "Why not?" "Because the pirates had been raiding civilian shipping for 3 years. Thousands of innocents had died. The humans said they needed to send a message." "What message?" Korvac met Zefkar's gaze, and the Alterian saw something in the Krogan's eyes he had never expected to see there: genuine fear. That there are things in this galaxy worse than pirates. The ship's intercom system activated, carrying Admiral Korthax's voice throughout the vessel. "All hands, long-range sensors have detected a Vorthak siege fleet approaching our position. Estimated arrival time, 14 hours. All combat personnel report to battle stations. This is not a drill. 14 hours. Zefkar looked around the hangar bay at the assembled alien soldiers, all professional warriors with years of experience and advanced training. They were checking weapons, reviewing tactical displays, and discussing strategy with the calm competence of experienced military personnel. But they all looked worried. Then, he spotted the human squad moving through a far doorway toward the ship's command center, and realized that worry might be the wrong emotion entirely. For the Vorthak. Admiral Korthax, came Chen's voice over the ship's communication system, human squad reporting for tactical consultation. "Chen, thank the stars. I need your assessment of our situation." "Reviewing sensor data now, sir." Initial analysis suggests the Vorthak have committed approximately 40 vessels to this operation, including at least 6 heavy battlecruisers and supporting fighter wings. "Can we win against those odds?" There was a pause before Chen responded, and, when she did, her voice carried that same terrible certainty Zefkar had heard from all the human soldiers. "Admiral, victory in conventional engagement is unlikely given current force disposition. Recommend alternative approach." What kind of alternative approach? The kind that explains why humans are in this fleet, sir. Another pause, longer this time. Chen, I want you and your people to report to strategic planning immediately. Bring everything you know about Vorthack psychology, tactics, and command structure. Acknowledged. Admiral, you should probably clear the planning room of non-essential personnel. Why? Because you're about to learn why most species in the galaxy sleep better at night knowing humans are on their side. The communication channel closed, leaving Zefkar and the other soldiers in the hangar bay with a growing sense of dread. Not dread of the approaching enemy fleet, but dread of what their own allies might be planning to do about it. As he made his way to his assigned quarters, Zefkar passed a viewport showing the empty space where the Vorthack fleet would emerge from hyperspace in less than 14 hours. He found himself wondering if those ships knew what they were flying toward. Somehow, he doubted it. Because if they did, they would probably turn around and go home. Zefkar couldn't sleep. The approaching Vorthack fleet was 12 hours out, and the entire ship hummed with nervous energy as alien soldiers prepared for what many believed would be their final battle. He had tried to rest, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Private Martinez calmly explaining that fear was pointless when you had no choices. He made his way through the ship's corridors, passing groups of Krogan warriors sharing battle stories, Hivari scouts updating tactical databases, and Luminari focusing their energy forms for combat. Everyone was preparing in their own way for the coming fight. The human squad was nowhere to be seen. Curious, and unable to shake his growing unease about humanity's role in the coming battle, Zefkar made his way toward the ship's strategic planning center. As he approached the heavily secured section, he encountered Korvek coming from the opposite direction. Can't sleep either, the Krogan asked. Too much to think about, Zefkar replied. Have you seen the humans? They've been in planning sessions with Admiral Korthax for the past 6 hours, Korvek said. Whatever they're discussing, it's classified above our security levels. That's unusual. Everything about humans is unusual. Korvek gestured toward the planning center's entrance, where 2 Thrakkery security guards stood at attention. I tried to get information from the guards, but they've been ordered not to discuss anything they might have overheard. Zefkar studied the guards' expressions and noticed something disturbing. Both Thrakkery looked worried, which was remarkable given their species' legendary composure under pressure. Lieutenant Velnexus, Zefkar addressed one of the guards, is there anything you can tell us about the strategic planning session? The Thrakkery lieutenant glanced nervously at his companion before responding. I am not authorized to discuss classified strategic information. We're not asking for classified details, Korvek pressed. We just want to know if the fleet has a viable plan for dealing with 40 Vorthack vessels. Velnexus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. The human representatives have presented several unconventional approaches to the tactical problem. Unconventional how? Zefkar asked. I cannot provide specifics, but... Velnexus looked around nervously. I would recommend that all personnel review emergency evacuation procedures. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If the ship's security personnel were thinking about evacuation procedures, whatever the humans were planning was beyond dangerous. Has Admiral Korthax approved any of these unconventional approaches? Korvek asked. The Admiral is still considering his options. Before either of them could ask more questions, the planning center's doors opened, and Admiral Korthax emerged. The elderly Draconian looked haggard, his scaled skin showing the gray pallor that indicated extreme stress in his species. Behind him came the human squad, looking exactly as calm and composed as they had throughout the entire operation. Sergeant Shen was carrying a data tablet, while the other soldiers maintained their standard equipment loadouts. Admiral, Zefkar called out, may I ask about our tactical situation? Korthax paused, his large eyes focusing on the Altarian with what appeared to be difficulty. Our situation is complex. The humans have provided me with several strategic options that I am still evaluating. What kind of options? Korvek asked. Korthax glanced at Chen, who nodded slightly. The conventional approach would be to position our fleet in defensive formation around the system's primary star and attempt to engage the Vorthack fleet as they emerge from hyperspace. Our tactical computers estimate approximately 30% chance of success with heavy casualties. And the unconventional approach? Zefkar pressed. Another glance at Chen. This time, the human sergeant spoke. We eliminate the threat before it becomes a threat, she said simply. Meaning what, exactly? Chen looked at Admiral Korthax, who made a gesture that might have been permission or resignation. The Vortak fleet is traveling in standard formation through a series of hyperspace jump points, Chen explained. They'll make their final jump from the Nexus 7 system, approximately 6 hours from our current position. Yes, Zefkar said slowly, that's standard tactical doctrine. Standard doctrine has predictable weaknesses, Chen continued. A fleet in hyperspace transit is essentially locked into its trajectory and cannot deviate until it reaches its destination. They're also effectively blind to external conditions during the final hours of their journey. The implications of what she was suggesting began to dawn on Zefkar. You want to attack them while they're in hyperspace? Not while they're in hyperspace, Chen corrected. While they're preparing to exit hyperspace. There's a 60-second window during deceleration where their ships are vulnerable to specific types of attack. What types of attack? Admiral Korthax asked, though his tone suggested he already knew and dreaded the answer. Nuclear mines with gravitational triggers, Private Williams answered, speaking up for the first time. We place them at the exact coordinates where the Vortak fleet will emerge. The mines detonate in sequence, creating cascading gravitational distortions that will tear the enemy ships apart before they can activate defensive systems. The silence that followed was deafening. Zefkar felt his blood freeze as he processed what the human demolitions expert had just described. It wasn't just a military tactic, it was systematic annihilation on an industrial scale. That would destroy the entire fleet, he whispered. Yes, Williams confirmed matter-of-factly. All 40 ships. Thousands of Vortak soldiers. Yes. Including ships that might contain non-combatant personnel. Williams glanced at Chen, who took over the explanation. Vortak siege fleets don't carry non-combatants, she said. Every individual on those ships is a trained warrior participating in an aggressive military operation against civilian targets. How can you be certain of that? Korvac asked. Because we've analyzed Vortak military doctrine and confirmed their fleet composition through electronic surveillance, Corporal Thompson answered. These aren't colony ships or mixed-use vessels. They're warships crewed exclusively by military personnel. But Zefkar struggled to find words for his growing horror. This isn't warfare. This is slaughter. Chen's brown eyes focused on him with that unsettling intensity he had come to associate with all the human soldiers. Warfare is slaughter. The only difference is scale and efficiency. There has to be another way, Admiral Korthax said, though he didn't sound convinced. There are always other ways, Chen agreed. We could engage them conventionally and lose 70% of our fleet while inflicting minimal damage on theirs. We could attempt to negotiate, though the Vortak historically don't honor agreements with species they consider inferior. We could retreat and allow them to establish control over this sector, which would lead to the enslavement of approximately 12 million civilians on nearby worlds. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Or we can eliminate the threat completely with zero risk to our personnel and minimal resource expenditure. You make it sound like a business decision, Zefkar accused. All military decisions are business decisions, Chen replied calmly. We're in the business of protecting people who cannot protect themselves. The most efficient way to accomplish that objective is to eliminate threats before they can harm anyone. The humans are right, Admiral Korthax said quietly, and everyone turned to stare at the elderly Draconian. I've spent the last 6 hours trying to find alternatives, but the mathematics are clear. Conventional engagement will result in massive casualties for minimal strategic gain. Negotiation is pointless with an enemy that views other species as resources to be harvested. Retreat means abandoning millions of innocent beings to slavery or death. So you're authorizing this operation? Korvac asked. I'm authorizing the preparation of gravitational mines, Korthax replied carefully. Deployment will depend on final confirmation of enemy intent and composition. Admiral, Chen said, will need 6 hours to reach the deployment coordinates and position the mines correctly. Time is becoming a factor. Korthax nodded slowly. Very well. Prepare your equipment. I'll issue movement orders to the fleet. As the planning group dispersed, Zefkar found himself walking alongside Private Martinez again. The young human woman was checking something on a handheld device, apparently reviewing technical specifications for the nuclear mines. How can you be so calm about this? He asked her. Martinez looked up from her device with those disturbingly old eyes. About what? About killing thousands of beings. She considered the question as they walked through the ship's corridors. Do you know what happened to the colony on Theta 9? Zefkar searched his memory. Vorthack raid about 2 years ago? 3 years, 4 months, 16 days ago, Martinez corrected with mechanical precision. The Vorthack siege fleet arrived without warning and demanded the colony's surrender. The colonists attempted to negotiate, offering to share mining rights and establish trade agreements. She paused at an intersection, apparently checking directions on her device. The Vorthack response was to orbital bombard the colony's primary settlement, killing 12,000 civilians instantly. Then, they landed occupation forces and enslaved the survivors. Men, women, children, it didn't matter. The strong were sent to mining camps. The weak were processed for biological materials. Zefkar felt sick. I didn't know the details. Most people don't, Martinez replied, resuming their walk. It's easier to think about military statistics than individual suffering. But those 12,000 people had names and families and dreams for the future. The survivors in the slave camps still have names, though they're probably too broken to remember them. They reached another intersection, and Martinez stopped to check her device again. So when you ask me how I can be calm about killing thousands of Vorthack soldiers, she continued, I think about those colonists. I think about the millions of other people who will die if we let this fleet reach its destination. And I remember that the only reason I exist, the only reason any human soldier exists, is to make sure that innocent people get to keep their names and families and dreams. But surely there must be limits, Zefkar protested. Some lines that shouldn't be crossed. Martinez's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. For just a moment, Zefkar glimpsed something ancient and terrible that had no business existing in someone so young. The only line that matters, she said quietly, is the one between the people we protect and the ones who want to hurt them. Everything else is just philosophy. She resumed walking, leaving Zefkar standing in the corridor with the growing realization that he was serving alongside beings who had long ago transcended traditional concepts of morality and warfare. They weren't soldiers in any sense he understood. They were something else entirely, something that had evolved beyond normal concepts of mercy and restraint. They were instruments of protection that had become so efficient at their purpose that they had lost the ability to question whether that purpose was worth the cost. As he made his way back to his quarters, Zefkar passed a viewport showing the stars wheeling slowly past as the fleet changed course toward the Nexus 7 system. Somewhere out there, 40 Vorthack warships were approaching what they believed would be a conventional naval engagement. They had no idea they were flying toward their own execution, carried out by beings who saw mass killing as a simple mathematical problem with an obvious solution. For the first time since joining the Galactic Defense Corps, Zefkar found himself wondering whether humanity's protection was worth the price of having such creatures as allies. And, for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. The next 5 hours passed in a blur of activity that Zefkar would remember for the rest of his life. The fleet moved through hyperspace toward the Nexus 7 system with mechanical precision, while human soldiers prepared their gravitational minds with the same calm efficiency they brought to everything else. Zefkar had obtained permission to observe the mine preparation process, though he suspected he would regret the decision. The weapons themselves were surprisingly small, each one about the size of his torso, constructed from materials he didn't recognize using technology he couldn't begin to understand. The difficult part isn't building the mines, Private Williams explained as he made final adjustments to the gravitational sensors. It's calculating the exact placement coordinates. We need to position them so the detonation sequence creates overlapping distortion fields that will affect the entire enemy formation simultaneously. How precise do the calculations need to be? Zefkar asked. Williams paused in his work to consider the question. If we're off by more than 50 meters in any direction, the mines will detonate harmlessly in empty space and the Vorthack fleet will arrive intact and ready for battle. 50 meters accuracy across interstellar distances. The mathematical precision required was staggering, yet Williams spoke about it as if it were a routine technical problem. Who performs these calculations? Zefkar asked. Thompson handles the computational analysis, Williams replied, gesturing toward where the young corporal was working at a bank of computer terminals. She's running probability matrices based on Vorthack fleet doctrine, hyperspace exit protocols, and gravitational conditions in the target system. Zefkar watched Thompson work, her fingers dancing across holographic displays with inhuman speed. She was processing variables that would challenge the most advanced computer systems, yet she appeared to be doing most of the work in her head, using the computers only for verification. "How long has she been working on this?" he asked. "Since we received the mission briefing 6 hours ago," Williams answered. "She should have final coordinates within the next 30 minutes. 6 hours to plan the complete annihilation of an enemy fleet. Most species required weeks or months to develop strategies for major naval engagements, but the humans were treating it like a routine maintenance procedure." "Williams," came Sergeant Chen's voice over the comm system, "status report on mine preparation." 15 units completed and tested, Williams responded. 3 more in final assembly. All systems showing green across the board. "Thompson? Coordinate calculations are 97% complete," Thompson called out from her position. "Confirming final variables now. Deployment window opens in 4 hours, 37 minutes. Copy. Jackson, Rodriguez, report to deployment bay for final mission briefing." Zefkar felt his stomach clench. "Deployment? You're actually going to deploy these weapons personally?" Williams looked at him with mild confusion. "Of course. Someone needs to place them at the correct coordinates and activate the targeting systems. But that means being present when the enemy fleet arrives." "Yes. You could be killed." Williams's expression didn't change. "That's always a possibility in military operations. But why take the risk? Surely the mines could be deployed remotely." "Remote deployment introduces too many variables," Williams explained patiently. "Mechanical systems can malfunction, communication delays can cause timing errors, automated positioning systems can drift. Human oversight ensures maximum probability of mission success." Maximum probability of mission success. He spoke about risking human lives as if it were an engineering consideration, a cost-benefit analysis where death was simply another factor in the equation. "Williams," Zefkar said carefully, "do you want to die?" The question seemed to puzzle the human demolitions expert. "Want doesn't enter into it. I have a job to do, and personal preferences don't change the tactical requirements." "But you must feel something about the possibility of dying." Williams was quiet for a moment, apparently thinking about how to explain something he considered obvious. Fear of death makes soldiers hesitate at critical moments. Hesitation gets people killed. Not just the soldier, but the people depending on that soldier to complete the mission. He returned to his work on the mines, apparently considering the conversation finished. Therefore, he continued without looking up, human military training focuses on eliminating emotional responses that compromise operational effectiveness. Eliminating emotional responses. Zefkar stared at Williams as the full implications sank in. These weren't soldiers who had overcome their fears, they were beings who had been systematically stripped of the psychological mechanisms that made other species hesitate before committing atrocities. "All personnel, prepare for emergence from hyperspace," came Admiral Korthax's voice over the ship's communication system. "Time to target coordinates, 47 minutes. The deployment bay was a hive of activity as human soldiers made final preparations for what would either be the most successful ambush in galactic history or a suicide mission of staggering proportions. Zefkar watched from an observation platform as Jackson and Rodriguez suited up in EVA gear designed for extended operations in deep space. "Final systems check," Sergeant Chen announced, though she was speaking primarily for the benefit of the non-human observers. The human soldiers had already completed their preparations with mechanical thoroughness. "Gravitational mines, 18 units, all systems nominal," Williams reported. "Navigation computers, course plotted and verified," Thompson confirmed. "Communication systems, full spectrum encrypted channels active, privately added. Life support, redundant systems operational, 48-hour endurance," Rodriguez called out as he sealed his helmet. 48 hours. If something went wrong, if the timing was off, if any of 1,000 variables failed to align perfectly, Jackson and Rodriguez would be stranded in space with the wreckage of 40 Vorthack warships. "Do they understand the risks?" Zefkar asked Korvek, who had joined him on the observation platform. The Krogan warrior's mandibles clicked nervously. "I think they understand the risks better than we do. That's what makes this so disturbing. The deployment shuttle was a sleek craft designed for stealth operations, its hull coated with materials that would make it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. As Jackson and Rodriguez loaded their cargo of gravitational mines, Zefkar noticed that both humans moved with the same unsettling calm they had displayed throughout the entire operation. Chen, Admiral Korthax's voice came over the comm system. I'm receiving updated intelligence from fleet reconnaissance. The Vorthak formation is larger than originally estimated. How much larger? Chen asked. 63 vessels, including 8 heavy battlecruisers and supporting Titan-class carriers. Estimated personnel count now exceeds 40,000 individuals. 40,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 40,000 Vorthak soldiers, each one a trained warrior with families and histories and hopes for survival. Does this change your tactical assessment? Korthax asked. Chen was quiet for only a moment. Negative, Admiral. Larger formation actually simplifies targeting calculations. More ships means tighter formation, which means the gravitational distortions will be more effective. Are you certain the mine array will be sufficient? 18 gravitational mines positioned in overlapping fields will create distortions equivalent to a small black hole, Thompson interjected. No known material can withstand that level of gravitational stress. The enemy ships will be torn apart at the molecular level. At the molecular level. Zefkar closed his eyes and tried not to imagine what that meant for the 40,000 beings aboard those ships. Final authorization required, Chen announced. Admiral, are you prepared to give the execute order? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Korthax's voice returned, heavy with the weight of command. Execute Operation Gravitational Hammer. May the stars forgive us all. The deployment shuttle launched silently from the fleet flagship, disappearing into the cosmic darkness with its cargo of annihilation. Jackson and Rodriguez had 2 hours to reach the target coordinates, deploy the mines, and withdraw to minimum safe distance. How long until we know if it worked? Korvac asked. The Vorthak fleet will emerge from hyperspace in exactly 2 hours and 14 minutes, Chen replied from her position at the tactical station. If the mines detonate correctly, we'll detect the gravitational distortions immediately. If not. She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. If the mines failed, the fleet would face 63 Vorthak warships in open combat. The next 2 hours passed with agonizing slowness. Zefkar found himself in the ship's observation lounge, staring out at the stars and trying to process what he was about to witness. Around him, other alien soldiers maintained their equipment and reviewed tactical data, but their conversations were muted and nervous. Only the humans remained completely calm. 30 seconds to mine activation, Thompson announced over the comm system. All gravitational mines are responding to command signals and positioned correctly. Copy, Chen replied. Jackson, Rodriguez, report your status. We're at minimum safe distance, came Jackson's voice from the deployment shuttle. All systems green, ready for detonation sequence. 10 seconds to enemy emergence, Thompson continued. Gravitational distortions building to critical levels. Mine activation in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The universe went silent. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the ship's sensors began registering gravitational anomalies of unprecedented magnitude. The viewport windows automatically darkened to protect observers from the brilliant flashes of light as space itself was torn apart at the target coordinates. Effect confirmed, Thompson reported with clinical precision. Gravitational cascade successful. Enemy fleet emergence prevented. Prevented. Such a clean, technical word for the complete annihilation of 40,000 beings. All mines detonated correctly? Chen asked. Affirmative. 18 sequential detonations created overlapping distortion fields as calculated. No enemy vessels survived emergence from hyperspace. No enemy vessels survived. The Vorthak siege fleet had simply ceased to exist, torn apart by forces beyond comprehension before they could even realize they were under attack. Jackson, Rodriguez, return to base, Chen ordered. Mission accomplished. Copy that. Heading home. Mission accomplished. Zefkar stared out at the slowly fading gravitational distortions and tried to understand what he had just witnessed. 40,000 warriors had died in the span of seconds, killed by weapons placed with mathematical precision by beings who spoke about mass murder as if it were a routine engineering problem. "Admiral Korthax, to all personnel," came the fleet commander's voice over the ship's communication system. "The Vortex siege fleet has been neutralized. All ships are to resume standard patrol formation and return to base." Neutralized. Another clean, technical term for wholesale slaughter. As the fleet began its journey back to base, Zefkar found himself once again sitting near Private Martinez. The young human woman was cleaning her rifle with mechanical precision, apparently unaffected by the knowledge that her species had just committed what most civilizations would consider a war crime of unprecedented magnitude. "How do you live with it?" he asked her quietly. Martinez looked up from her weapon. "Live with what?" "The knowledge that you just helped kill 40,000 beings." She considered the question as she continued working on her rifle. 40,000 beings who were traveling to this system to kill millions of civilians. But they never got the chance to make that choice. "They made that choice when they joined the siege fleet," Martinez replied calmly. "Every Vortex soldier aboard those ships volunteered for military service knowing their species' history of genocide and enslavement. They chose to participate in an aggressive military operation against civilian targets. But surely some of